What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video. And this week we're going to be looking at an archetype that always seems to find a place in some of like the Eternal formats and even like in the standard format. It's very popular, people always try to make it work. It's always played and finds a way to be very good even, when people are doing fun and crazy things. Like this deck basically tries to play the fun police and stop those people from living their dreams. So today, we're going to be looking at the Azorious control deck that took down the Pioneer Challenge this past weekend. In Pioneer, let's go check it out. And here we have the Azorious control deck piloted by 420 Dragon. Nice. That took first place in the Pioneer Challenge, actually going 5-2 in Swiss. So I'm assuming that they just barely made the cut for top 8. But you know what? Made the most of it. Obviously, taking down the dang challenge. So before we get too deep into the deck list and talk about all the fun policing that we can do with this deck, I just want to say thank you to everybody that has subscribed to the channel and supported my channel up to this point. It's been a lot of fun like making these videos and getting to interact with the people that comment on these videos and stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, and honestly something that I like doing, and you like to see a grown man happy, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe, ring the notification bell, and leave a comment on the videos as well, either talking about the deck or maybe just some general strategizing in general. I like talking about that stuff. I like interacting with like the people that interact on my videos and stuff, and of course I like seeing that subscriber count go up, trying to hit our subscribers before the end of the year, and with the rate that we're going, we should be able to crush that. So again, if you're not subscribed already, please go ahead and do so. And with that being said, let's go ahead and look at the deck. So blue-white control, a lot of the time, I mean, it's a control deck. Like it basically tries to play some big dumb thing, and after basically running your opponent out of resources and picking your right spots to like kind of fight over things, and then they play like their threat, and then they're able to protect that threat through basically the rest of the game until like it's over. So it looks like for this blue white deck in general, there's really like only one win condition. Like Teferi Hero Dominaria uh, basically been an all-star since I came out in Dominaria. Uh, the fact that it's a 5 mana planeswalker that for a +1, essentially, like for a 5 mana investment, you get a 3 mana planeswalker, essentially. And you're able to keep up some like your other counter spells, some of your other like removal spells to protect Teferi from that point. Teferi has his own built-in protection of putting a non-land permanent into its owner's library third from the top. Technically, Teferi is also a win condition, not only with the emblem, but you could, in theory, continue to cast and tuck Teferi, and then you get to a point where your opponent is drawing cards, and you're essentially drawing the same Teferi. And as long as you're able to stop your opponent from removing the Teferi or interrupting the loop, they will eventually deck out, which is probably one of the best ways for this deck to win. Because if your opponent wants to continue to play the game and they run so low on clock, or if you're playing in paper, so low on time that you're just able to kind of stall and win the game 1-0-1. And again, make your opponent very sad. Um, but yeah, Teferi Hero Dominaria, easily probably one of the best control planeswalkers of all time, up there with like Jace the Mind Sculptor and things like that. However, in Pioneer, we don't have Jace the Mind Sculptor, but we do have another double colored 4 mana planeswalker, and it's the Wandering Emperor. Can cast it with Flash, and as long as it enters the battlefield this turn, you can activate loyalty abilities anytime you can cast an instant, which allows you to play the Wandering Emperor on your opponent's turn and use any one of the abilities. Um, the most popular one, if you're like playing this on your opponent's turn, is obviously the -2, where you exile a tap creature and you gain 2 life. It does gain you a lot of tempo, and your opponent isn't able to remove the Wandering Emperor, at least with the creatures that they have attacking, because they're either already attacking you or they're attacking like a Teferi Hero Dominaria, something of that nature. The fact that this card also, I mean, with like 4 mana, just like getting the tempo of like exiling your opponent's like biggest creature and then even making like a 2/2 is pretty good. And then if you're able to like kind of keep this around, and just kind of like make 2/2s the rest of the time, like that can also get you to a point where you're able to go into the late game and play your Teferi Hero Dominarius and leave up multiple spells to be able to interact with your opponent and stuff. Um, the Wandering Emperor, obviously, at least to me, is the worst of the two planeswalkers in this deck, but is very effective at what it does and can get you to casting Teferis and being able to protect them. Obviously, with multiple creatures or the other spells and stuff that you have. Um, the deck also plays 3 Shark Typhoon. A lot of the time, like you just play this to cycle, just make a 3-3 or a 4-4 at instant speed, 3-3 or 4-4 flyer at instant speed, and you get to draw a card from it. You can also just like tap out to play like a Shark Typhoon, and then like your Teferi Hero Dominarias bring 5/5 flyers with them that can also win the game. And then obviously in conjunction with drawing extra cards and hitting for 5, you can end the game. End game's very quick. Um, you have Castle Ardenvales. Technically, like they make 1/1s. Castle Ardenvale can make a 1/1 human for essentially 5 mana, paying 4, and then tapping the castle as well. Um, just the various ways that this deck can win. It has ways that win the game very slowly. Minus like Shark Typhoon can end the game very quickly. Like on like turn 8 or turn 9, something like that. But like the Fair Hero Dominaria, definitely like a slow way of like winning those games. So we established like what the win conditions are. Most of our win conditions tie into extending the game or just generating value for us to the point where we're able to fully take over the game, and doesn't matter what actions our opponent takes, like we are able to control it. So what other spells are we playing to actually enact this game plan? Um, so starting off, like we have like March of the Otherworldly Light, Faithful Absence, and then we have like Supreme Verdict and Farewell as kind of like our removal options for the deck. The Faithful Absence, destroying a creature or a planeswalker, so it does have like that versatility to um, take out planeswalkers as well, like in like the mirror matches and stuff like that. Its controller does get to investigate, but it's a small price. You give them a card, but like more normally the 2 mana that you're spending to remove like a planeswalker or like a troublesome creature is worth more than them getting to just draw a card at some point later. You also have cards like Supreme Verdict that can't be countered Wrath. Like this is basically famous from like Return to Ravnica standard up until like it rotated out of standard. It was a staple in modern for like the blue white control decks or the blue white X control decks, and just an uncounterable wrath, especially against like certain like aggro decks, kind of like mono blue in particular, or like spirits. Supreme Verdict is very good. Farewell, just getting to deal with all of said things like artifacts, creatures, enchantments, graveyards. Doesn't help like against planeswalkers or anything like that, so um, definitely kind of gets hurt there, but just getting to deal with everything else that the deck could have a problem with dealing with, and doing it all on one card is pretty impressive. There's also Portable Hole for the especially like aggressive aggro decks. Uh, you can also just get something, a permanent with value 2 or less, until Portable Hole leaves the battlefield. So you are able to take like other things, like you're able to get underneath like out from underneath like Pithing Needles and things like that. Even I'm sure there's like other cards and stuff like that that Portable Hole can hit that aren't creatures, but I'd imagine Portable Hole having like that flexibility does help it. But if it just gets rid of like 1 and 2 mana creatures like from the mono red deck or maybe from like the Boros aggro decks and things like that, Portable Hole definitely will get the job done. Finally, March of the Otherworldly Light is one of the newer like pitch cards from the new Kamigawa set. You can exile white cards from your hand and basically make the spell cost 2 less for each card exiled this way. So you could pay like 1 mana and exile a white card, and you can exile a artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value X or less. Obviously, you can pay mana into X. So this card does have like some flexibility where if you need the removal right this second for a 2-drop, you just pitch a white card, pay your white mana, and you can get rid of a 2-drop. On the other hand, like if you're playing in the late game, like you don't have to go down on cards. Like this card does offer a lot of flexibility of you can just pay mana to exile stuff, or you can pay cards to exile problematic things as well that just demand an immediate answer. Um, and of course, we would not be in a Azorious control deck if we didn't have some form of counter spells. Censor, just a great card, like when you're on the play and just getting to like play land, say go, and then your opponent goes to play 2-drop and you just censor it is really sweet. Also having the added bonus of cycling, so you can start like filling up your graveyard with like censors and stuff like that. Just as they become dead cards. Dovin's Veto is basically uncounterable negate. Definitely can come up sometimes, especially like control mirrors. Dovin Veto just kind of says no to whatever problematic like permanent, like Teferi Hero Dominaria or Wandering Emperor that your opponent could play. For Absorb, definitely can give you a lot of tempo as well. A lot of this deck, if you know like turn one, like you have access to like March of the Otherworldly Light. Turn two, like censor your opponent's 2-drop, and then like getting to absorb the 3-drop, and then just gain life. And like a lot of times against like the super aggressive decks and stuff like that, like the 3 life can be relevant on top of the tempo that you gain from like countering the spell. Finally, not really in either camp, but like Memory Deluge basically being like a dig through time that you don't have to exile cards for. You only get to look at X cards, where X is the amount of mana that you spent to cast a spell. So when you cast the first half of Deluge, you only get to look at 4 cards, but you get to put 2 of them into your hand. You put the rest on the bottom, and then you flash back for 7, and you get to look at 7 cards, and you get to put 2 of them into your hand. Just something that you can sink your mana into while also just being a good early game option as well when you're just kind of like developing your hand and trying to work out a game plan to essentially like later kill your opponent, but also make sure that you don't just get got by like some other random cards. Um, the mana base, pretty simple, at least I think it's pretty simple. You have like Castle Ardenvale, which we went over earlier. Go ahead and makes 1/1s. Comes into play untapped if you have or comes into play tapped unless you control planes. Castle Vantress, a part of the castle cycle from Throne of Eldraine, comes into play tapped unless you control an island, and you can pay 4 mana and tap it to scry 2. Deserted Beach, blue white dual land. You have like 1 Glacial Fortress, blue white dual land, comes into play untapped comes into play tapped unless you control planes or an island. You have like Hollowed Fountains, the premier shock land for the blue white colors. Irrigated Farmland, having the plains and island subtype, I believe. I think that's what it's called. It's a subtype. And basically allowing your other lands that care about basic land types to come into play untapped, and also having the ability to be cycled and not having to play like and doing it for cheaper. Like we have like the tri lands, where the tri lands cost 3 mana to cycle. This being 2, can definitely kind of help out a lot, in terms of just being like more mana efficient to cycle than say like with the Bant Triomes, or like the Rogran Triome and stuff like that. um, 1 Otawara, Soaring City, just get about something for 4 mana. This is essentially like an uncounterable way of getting this effect. Same thing with like a Ganjo Seed of the Empire, just an uncounterable way, almost uncounterable way to like deal 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. Just another way that you can like protect your like planeswalkers and protect your life total to get into that late game. Sideboard, there's Aether Gust, the big green decks, now that they're like shifting more towards like a band, getting away from like the, big giant like Bolus the Dragon God, and playing like more Teferi who sets the sun. I believe that's the name. So Aether Gust, less good specifically against like the Teferi, but Aether Gust still definitely a must-have card in like the sideboard. Another Dovin's Veto, just to go up to like the 4th copy if you need it. Narset's Reversal can copy a target or instant or sorcery spell and then return it to its owner's hand. So in theory, like you could Narset Reversal like your own spell and then like just copy it, and essentially your opponent has to have another answer for it. This essentially can like counter your opponent's spell and then like return your copy to your hand and still get the copy. Obviously, if your opponent plays some like pretty giant dumb spell, they tap out for it, you can Narset's Reversal and take it. But I feel like a lot of the time, and some amount of time, it will come up that you can just like counter your own spell in a way and then return it to your hand and then just get a copy of it that your opponent then has to like have another answer for as well. And like really only getting to deal with like a card and a half, and they still have to the threat of like the card that you just countered in a way and return to your hand. 3 Rest in Peace, because I hate the Greasefang deck so much. We went over it, I believe, last week. The deck is very good. It just feels like a lot of the time, like they're able to like turn 3 Greasefang into Parhelion, and it's just so hard to beat if you're not faster than it or able to disrupt it. So like definitely need the Rest in Pieces on the board. Mystical Dispute, obviously a very efficient like counterspell against like the blue base decks. Um, can be okay, paying 3 mana to make your opponent pay 3, but definitely against like the predominantly like blue decks and stuff, you want Mystical Dispute more than anything. Narset can kind of stunt your opponent's like development of like certain things. You can also just get people like when they're just trying to draw like extra cards off of like other spells. Specifically against like the Phoenix deck, you stop a lot of like their considers and a lot of their ops and things like that, and their other draw spells and stuff. Because of course I cannot remember them off the top of my head in this moment. Not like I've been playing the deck forever, but Narset kind of like shuts that down, and you're able to like find some of your other like non-creature spells in your in your main deck to kind of combat like the blue red Phoenix decks. Dreamtrawler, this card's sick. I love this card. I played it in blue white when Pioneer was just kind of like getting started and like getting some support. I love this card. It's sweet. It gets +1/+0. Like whenever you draw a card, it gets +1/+0, and then whenever it attacks, you get to draw a card. So most of the time, it gets to attack as like a 5/5 on your turn. And having a lifelink, a 5 point, essentially a 10 point difference, you gaining 5, them losing 5, is huge. You can also like protect it. Of course, it sucks when your opponent is able to like uh, attempt to kill it before combat. You ditch a card to it, and you get to keep it around, but it's still annoying nonetheless, and it basically forces your opponent to have an answer for it every turn and have enough answers to deal with it unless they're playing like a sweeper. Another farewell, um, I'd imagine just like the utility of the card, just being able to keep your own creatures around if you want to. If your opponent's creatures are a threat, whatever. Getting rid of just some annoying permanents in the game that aren't planeswalkers predominantly. Hullbreaker Horror is a big threat that can't be countered. I think kind of replace like Nezahal in some of these lists. But whenever you cast a spell, you can choose up to one, and you can rid a spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So essentially, like you get to play this like untap, and then like on top of getting to like protect it, you're able to just kind of like set your opponent back as well, just by bouncing like their non-land permanents and stuff. As like you go and like counter their spells, like you just bounce their things, or go to like draw cards and then you just like return their spell and stuff like that. So that's the blue-white control deck in a nutshell for Pioneer. Overall, I'm not usually a big fan of like Azorious control. I do think it's a very satisfying deck to play. Definitely, if you have a wealth of knowledge of like the Pioneer format, like Blue Eye Control is very good. But it also like tuning it basically to like your meta is super important. So like maybe copying this deck list, like card for card, might not be technically correct for like your local meta and stuff like that. I think I'd feel very confident taking this just to like an open tournament, like an RCQ, like if you're out of town or something like that. But definitely having an understanding of like the format, how to sequence things, and like how you exactly you want to accomplish the game plan, and just kind of not being baited on like a lot of things too. Like definitely blue eye control takes a lot of skill to play. While I don't think it's necessarily one of the most skill intensive decks just as an archetype period across like every format, you definitely need to be a very good player to be a very good Azorius control pilot. So that's basically how I summarize the deck. If you want to play it, go ahead and play it. Just be sure to do a lot of studying and just really understanding like how cards interact and stuff in the format. So that's gonna do it for me in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Of course, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe and ring the notification bell. I post videos like this all the time. I do some gameplay for like the modern Pioneer format as well as some other discussion videos. So if that's something that interests you, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 100 subscribers because that would be freaking awesome. But that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.